Here at the Disasters Emergency Committee. We've just launched our appeal for the Indonesian tsunami, and I was talking earlier to Zia Salek from DEC member agency Islamic Relief. Zia's flown out from the UK recently, and he's now in Indonesia helping coordinate efforts on the ground. So let's hear more of what Zia had to tell me earlier on about what it's like on the ground in Indonesia at the moment.
My name is Zia Salek, and I'm the head of community fundraising at Islamic Relief UK. Currently, I'm in Jakarta in Indonesia. Islamic Relief has an office based in Indonesia, and obviously when the tsunami hit Palu, the team was dispatched immediately to go there. But I came over from the UK to join the team to gather the information, to capture footage and feedback to our donors of the work that we're doing and the impact that their donations are having on the ground. I arrived in Jakarta on Tuesday and have been with the team since then and working out on some of the, coordinating some of the work that's been going on here. So when the Islamic Relief team first arrived on Sulawesi Island, the immediate task was actually getting to Palu, which because of the landslides and the destruction to infrastructure was actually a 23-hour drive. The first thing that the team had to do was assist in moving the bodies of those that had passed away to burial sites because there was a complete lack of vehicles and shortage of petrol to even move the vehicles around. So the team that arrived there were able to assist with transporting the bodies of those that are deceased. So Islamic Relief Indonesia dispatched an emergency response team to Sulawesi that included the country director and several members of the programs team, the logistics and admin support team. So we've actually set up a small office in Palu itself to coordinate the operation there. But we also set up an administrative post in Momojo, which is slightly south. Normally it's only a 3-hour drive to Palu, but because of the roadblocks and landslides, it's around a 12-hour drive to Palu itself. But most of the procurement is happening in Momojo, and then it's been transported up to Palu to be distributed. We also work with a couple of local partners that we work with in Indonesia anyway. So the team that's responding in Palu is comprised of several Islamic Relief Indonesia members of staff, but also several members of our partner organizations as well. When the team first arrived in Palu itself, I think it was a case of getting busy with the operation itself. It was trying to put aside the scale of the disaster and trying to get involved and trying to make an impact to those survivors that were left behind. It was quite clear that thousands of families had been devastated in terms of all of their homes and belongings had been destroyed. And many people were in search of loved ones. And I think this was probably the emotionally most difficult to deal with for our staff, looking at young people, sometimes even children that are walking around the rubble. We heard of a young child who was wandering around, and our country director was speaking to him and saying, "Who are you looking for?" And they weren't speaking, they were just looking around as if they were looking for family members. So I think that was the kind of very difficult thing to deal with. And then the sheer scale of the destruction. I mean, huge buildings that were built from concrete were completely destroyed. And then they told us about the smell that they could smell coming from the rubble, which to them indicated that there were still bodies underneath. That was very, very heartbreaking. And I think it was just a case of trying to focus on the difference that they were able to make to the survivors, because as we know, the tsunami can kill instantly, but right now we know that the tsunami can kill slowly if there are bodies still trapped under rubble that we need to get out, and also those that are left behind that don't have access to clean water. We need to stop the spread of infectious diseases, and those that don't have food. It's a case of getting food to them, because some of them hadn't eaten for 3 or 4 days when we got to them and give them the basics like rice and water. This part of the world, as you know, is so disaster prone. So our teams are used to dealing with natural disasters. I mean, half of the team were actually still in Lombok responding to the earthquake that took place there a few weeks back. and they were still supporting families there when this happened, and it was a case of splitting the team and sending people to Palu as well. So although they're used to dealing with natural disasters in this part of the world, it's still very, very difficult for them to deal with something like this, where you arrive at the scene of a disaster, and the first thing you're having to do is support the people on the ground with the burial of their loved ones. To a point, I mean, because so many people the bodies were being found in such huge numbers that there was a shortage of body bags. And that sounds very inhumane, almost insensitive, but in the middle of the crisis, the focus was to get those that had passed away to burial sites and to bury them and lay them to rest with dignity. And I think, as a community, it's a responsibility upon those that are left behind to support the loved ones and to really to help them in their hour of need and give them some peace and closure, because although it's difficult for our aid workers, ultimately it's so much more traumatic for those that actually experienced the tsunami, survived it, and then found that their loved ones were not as lucky as they were. So it was difficult, but I think our job and the job of our team is to really give the community that a sense of support, especially, from a psychological perspective, and give them that reassurance that the international community is with them, that they're not forgotten, that support is coming from across the world, not just from Indonesia, and really help them through this very, very difficult time that I think is going to take a long time for a lot of people to get over, especially the young children. They're going to need a lot of social cycle support and really help them with coming to terms with what they've experienced. So our colleagues have been telling us about many families that they've met in Palu, and as we know, around 1,500 people are still unaccounted for, and many of the family members are actually in desperate need of trying to locate them. And to be honest, I think at this stage now, many of them have come to terms with the fact that they probably haven't made it. So there are so many incidences where family members have come to our team members and ask them to try and find and locate their family members. But the only real way to get to the bodies under the rubble is with heavy machinery. And, the military and the government are on the ground supporting with that. But it is very, very difficult. So what our teams are able to do right now is really just give them that support and assist the survivors with the emergency aid items that we're distributing. When the team first arrived, it was very difficult to get to Palu, and especially to get the aid and relief items there. They were able to take enough supplies for several hundred families in the vehicles that they had themselves on that very long journey to get to Palu. But as I mentioned before, getting from Mamuju to Palu, which should be a 3.5 hour journey, is now looking around 12 to 15 hours. But now the trucks are on their way. They're taking a huge detour. So instead of going straight north to Palu, they're taking a detour towards the east and coming all the way around, and they're reaching there. Our team are distributing essentially at the moment rice for families in terms of food, and bottled water for now, and that will move towards water trucking. And also the tarpaulin that families need to, because although right now there's a lot of heat, families need shelter, they need protection from the sun. But this is going to take time for the area to be rebuilt, for shelters to be built, for families to be rehomed. And in that time, they need shelter. So those are the key priority things. And of course, from a medical perspective, medical supplies are coming in. Several organizations, DEC members, are providing water filtration units, and they're also providing generators because there's no electricity at the moment, which we almost assume is a luxury, but to be honest, it's a basic amenity that families need for lighting, especially in the situation that they're in, where they're having to walk through destruction essentially to get to their tents where they're living. And also, to charge mobile phones so that they can communicate with loved ones. Many families in Palu have relatives in other parts of the Sulawesi Island, so people are trying to contact with each other, and the generators and providing electricity is really assisting with that. in terms of the rehabilitation and reconstruction of homes and resettlement of families, it's very difficult to say how long it will take, but it would be at least months and if not years until the whole area is actually cleared out. I mean, you've probably seen the images on the DEC website and on social media, especially the aerial shots of the level of destruction. So it's not even a case of just rebuilding the houses. It's all collapsed and actually kind of become one huge block of concrete, which actually needs to be dismantled and removed before rebuilding can actually take place. So, we estimate it's going to take years before we can get to a sense of normality. The emergency assistance from DEC partners is getting through to the people that have been affected in Palu, and aid is reaching those that are in desperate need. But we know that over 200,000 people are still in desperate need of support. So your support is absolutely vital right now. We need to do everything we can to save the survivors. So please give what you can and donate today.
So as you heard from Zia, the needs on the Indonesian island of Sulawesi are great. In particular, you heard Zia talking about the need for food, water and shelter. So please do continue to donate generously because that money is very, very much needed. Zia also spoke about the traumatized children wandering around in the aftermath of this devastating earthquake and tsunami. So one of the things that DEC members do is they provide what we call child-friendly spaces. You'll realize that once a disaster of this scale has happened, schools and all sorts of other facilities are just completely destroyed or shut down, so children have nowhere to go. So DEC members are already setting up what we call child-friendly spaces, and that's an area where children go so they can talk about what they've experienced and start to have a little bit of education, talk through their experiences and regain some sense of normality. And it's really, really important to children that starts to happen. So if you do donate to the DEC appeal, your money will also go to help those children traumatized by this awful, awful thing that they've experienced. So please do continue to donate generously at dec.org.uk, and I'll see you again tomorrow.